Hello and welcome to another standard video here on the official MTG Arena channel. Aetherdrift just released and I'm checking out this green-white Brightglass Gearhulk deck built around this 4-mana artifact creature, first strike and trample. When it enters we can search our library for up to 2 artifact, creature and or enchantment cards with mana value 1 or less, reveal them and put them into our hand. So immediate card advantage as well as plenty of synergies to assemble with our Gearhulk, as we're also playing with a full set of Teething Wormlets, a 1/1 that can get a +1 counter if we play an artifact for the first time each turn, also gains a life and that can happen multiple times. And then the rest of the deck includes a bunch more artifacts, as well as the Collector's Cage package, which you might have seen in other green-white decks in the previous standard, a 2-mana artifact with Hideaway 5, so when it enters we take a look at the top 5 cards of our library, exiling one of them in secret face down, and then once we get to enable the Collector's Cage's condition, aka after activating and putting a +1 counter on one of our creatures, then if we control 3 creatures with different powers, we get to play the exiled card without paying its mana cost, so we can cheat on some very expensive cards as well. And this deck doesn't have an incredibly high curve, but we still have access to cards like Steel Seraph, which can be prototyped for 3 mana, but thanks to Collector's Cage we can play the 6 mana version for free, a 5/4 flying artifact creature that can give our creatures various abilities at the beginning of combat, including flying, vigilance and or a lifelink. So another card to synergize with our Teething Wormlet as well. Another card that's excellent to cheat and play with a Collector's Cage is a Dollmaker's Shop, or more specifically the Porcelain Gallery, as we can once again choose which half of the card to play for free. The Dollmaker's Shop also a great turn 2 play following up a turn 1 Teething Wormlet, as we can attack with a Wormlet, make a 1/1 toy artifact creature token, which will trigger the Wormlet, giving it a counter and gaining a life, and that can eventually build up an army of toy tokens, at which point the Porcelain Gallery becomes very deadly, saying creatures we control have base power and toughness each equal to the number of creatures we control. So if we control 6 creatures, all our creatures will be 6/6 as a baseline. Any additional +1 counters can still apply on top of that, so the Teething Wormlet will often still be larger than the rest of the team. And then rounding out the deck, we've got some mana acceleration with Lenor Elves, of course, and at 2 mana the Twitching Doll, an artifact creature that can also trigger the Wormlet, and this also picks up nest counters, so we can eventually sacrifice the doll to make lots of 2/2 spider tokens with reach, which can also help us go wide to make the Porcelain Gallery even more effective. And then we've got the full set of Sandstorm Salvager, a 1/1 creature making a 3/3 golem token, so that's great for enabling our cage, and can also pay 2 mana, tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature token we control, and they also gain trample, so very synergistic with a Dollmaker's Shop and eventually the Twitching Doll if we decide to sacrifice it. And then taking a look at the other one-offs that we can maybe search up with our Gearhulk, we've got a Dusk Rose Reliquary as removal. Do need to sacrifice an artifact or creature, but that's usually not too difficult. The Nurturing Pixie can maybe pick up our Gearhulk to re-enable it, or perhaps pick up our Collector's Cage after we've already gotten our Hideaway card, so we can get one once again. The Haywire Might, an answer to opposing non-creature artifacts or non-creature enchantments. We've got the Basilisk Collar, giving our equipped creature Death Touch and Lifelink, very effective with a first striking Brightglass Gearhulk especially. Then there's the Lava Spur Boots and other equipment, giving the equipped creature 1 extra power, haste, and ward 1, especially good against control decks that rely on sweepers to keep the board clear, as we can always keep up the pressure. And finally, I'm trying a Market Back Walker, which also scales nicely with the amount of mana we have access to, getting more +1 counters, can also pay 4 mana to give it an extra +1 counter, and then when it dies we get to draw a card for each counter on it. Can also maybe combine it with our own Dusk Rose Reliquary to sacrifice it if our opponent doesn't cooperate. So we have those 2 cards available as well. And then if the metagame were to shift to include lots of graveyard decks, don't hesitate to include a Ghost Vacuum as another one-off you can find with the Gearhulk. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with a fine hand. Some mana acceleration to set up our Gearhulk ahead of schedule. Facing blue-white. So we'll see which variety soon enough. For now, Doll plus Collar looks good. And hope there's no lockdown to exile everything. Okay. Yeah, I guess Gearhulk's worth a shot. See if that resolves. It does not. So probably fine to attack for 2, even though we miss out on the counter. Probably need this to make mana for quite a while. Opponent just passing with 3 mana, missed our land drop. So now I prefer double spelling. Can go Shop plus Steel Seraph. Although if Shop resolves, I may just want to attack to make sure we get our token. But I guess I could still play Seraph. Opponent forced to counter once again. So now I can just go for Gearhulk. And then if I pick up Pixie, I can bounce the Gearhulk back to my hand. Although if they remove it in the meantime, we don't get a ton of value. I think Walker could be decent unless we face removal that exiles our creatures. Then it's not going to do much. Haste is also usually pretty good against control to recover from a board wipe. So maybe for now we go Boots, and then I think it's between Wormlet or Pixie. Reliquary potentially an answer to, I guess it doesn't answer enchantments. So then Might could be an answer to a lockdown, but we haven't seen it so far. So yeah, close call. Pixie doesn't do much if they answer Gearhulk. So then I might prefer just a Wormlet. So now our concern is our opponent just having some board wipes in hand. Collector's Cage would be pretty decent too here, since we already have 3 creatures with different powers, and yes, speak of the devil. So I can even play Wormlet first if I'd like. I guess Spell Pierce is now in the format, so that's a card we need to have on our radar. Wormlet grows, and we'll see what Hideaway reveals. A Salvager. So can activate Cage. Could also play Boots and still equip. And then I guess I'll just target the Wormlet. Put in Salvager. And attack for 8. Opponent does get to scry. Maybe hits a 4th land for a Day of Judgment. In which case we can at least follow up with a Steel Seraph with haste. Wormlet has Ward 1, so even if they had an Elspeth's Smite, they wouldn't be able to take it out. So our opponent put a stop and upkeep to scry again, since they're probably desperate for a 4th land. They bottomed, so it's still a random draw step here. Did they get there? They did. Is this a Day of Judgment? It is. Alright, so the game goes on. Steel Seraph with haste, probably better than Doll activate Cage haste. I guess it's close, since they both would hit for the same amount of damage. Sure, and this maybe gives us more options if we tap it for mana next turn. So our opponent falls to 4. Any one of our creatures here could be lethal. Although the Tome is also close to gaining 4 life. Split up wipes the board. Opponent's got 1 mana left. So yeah, this Steel Seraph could cross the finish line for us. Boots for Ward. So if they don't have an answer now, it's probably going to be too late. And hit you for 5. Can even go for Vigilance, but there's no removal spell our opponent could play at this point. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Turn 1 Elves can set up Wormlet plus Cage, and then we're not too far off activating the Cage. Pixie can also pick it back up if the Hideaway doesn't find anything exciting, or maybe after enabling it we can pick it back up to get a second Hideaway card. Opponent's gonna cut down, so That's going to slow us down significantly. So do I still play Cage just to be more mana efficient? Even though I miss out on a Wormlet trigger, feels like our opponent's keeping up removal. So playing Wormlet's not gonna accomplish much. And then Steel Seraph over Salvager, probably. At least it doesn't die to go for the throat. Opponent on the Demon deck. Alright, now we can at least double spell Wormlet and Twitching Doll. And then next turn we could potentially go for Cage. And I suppose I could even respond to the Pixie trigger to activate Cage, put counter on one of my 2/2s, get a free Steel Seraph, and then pick up Cage once again. But that's assuming our opponent doesn't mess with our creatures. Alright, and they did not, just tapping out for Bloodletter. Still quite scary, but let's see. Could now also play the boots. So if I plan to play Pixie and activate Cage, I could still replay Cage this very same turn. Or we could have the boots give Steel Seraph haste, which might be more beneficial. I guess the doll can also tap for mana, so we have quite a few options actually. I guess I could just activate Cage twice. I think that might be the best option. So play Pixie. I'm in full control here just to make sure I don't mess up. Target Cage, in response, activates, go for Wormlet, get a free Steel Seraph, the 5/4 version please. Wormlet grows, and then replay Cage, and then I can activate once again, this time revealing I guess another Cage over Salvager. Can keep things going. And this time I could target the Pixie. Get another Cage. Well, that's a lot of value in one turn. And yeah, now the Gallery could be decent, or we could just go for another Steel Seraph. Reliquary, an answer to an opposing creature. I think I like... If I go for Gallery, I could then also unlock the shop. Although if they have a bunch of removal, my creatures will shrink. So another Steel Seraph might just be better. And then we'll give this lifelink. Hit you for 4. And Steel Seraph is not a bad blocker for Bloodletter. The Cages provide more +1 counters as well. Opponent's got another Annex. That is 4 damage for each, thanks to the Bloodletter. And a Nowhere to Run takes out Pixie. That's fine. So they don't have a good attack. Alrighty, so can still activate Cage, get our Author Steel Seraph. Have to target... I guess Steel Seraph is still fine. Trigger Wormlets, play Boots. Go to attackers. And then want to give either double lifelink, or we can give Vigilance to one of my flyers. In case our opponent's got a 2-card combo with a Bloodletter, have to be careful. Sure, so we'll give this one Vigilance, and this one lifelink. So gotta make sure I'm targeting the right one. Could have also given the same one both Vigilance and lifelink, of course. And then I still have a Cage activation, which is probably going on the lifelinker here. Yeah, I guess giving both a lifelink and Vigilance to the Steel Seraph with Ward made more sense, in case there's another Nowhere to Run to shrink down my creature. I guess the Ward also doesn't matter with Nowhere to Run in play. So, we'll see here. And then the Twitching Doll's just gonna tap to add another counter. Although in a pinch we can also turn it into a bunch of spiders. So yeah, we're trying to fight a good fight. Our opponent may have given up. Opponent falls to 2. Pass a turn. And then make sure to put an end step stop so we can still tap the Twitching Doll, adding another counter. But yeah, if our opponent does not have something special here, we should be able to get there next turn. Let's say they just make a 6/6 demon token. They still get to gain 4 life end of turn up to 6. But then we'll still be attacking for at least 6 past their 2 blockers. But yeah, that was an impressive start, thanks to the Pixie and the Cage, allowing us to set it up twice. And then from here, good top decks include our Porcelain Gallery, Gearhulk could get a removal spell for Bloodletter with Reliquary. So we still have some pretty good top decks left. But yeah, looks like our opponent's timing out. Their demon keeps them alive. And we're just going to attackers here. Can give these a lifelink once again. And then now even the Twitching Doll could attack, since Cage can also pump it up. Alright, and our opponent explodes. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a fine hand. Wormlet into Cage. Turn 3 Steel Seraph. And Might is still just an extra body to help enable the Cage if necessary. Opponent on a blue-red vehicle deck. Or they might just be playing all the cheap cyclers. But these are vehicles. And there is a card in Aetherdrift, I believe, that can return all vehicles from the graveyard and crew them for free. So that's probably what they're trying to set up. So that's going to be scary. As we find... Yeah, we don't have any graveyard hate we can find with a Gearhulk. But I think it's still the pick over Gallery, just because we're not going incredibly wide with this hand. Could also go for another Cage, but I feel like Gearhulk's pretty good. But yeah, I don't remember exactly how much mana that reanimation spell costs. Could be 7 or 8. So in the meantime, probably still going for Steel Seraph. Although if we go Might, Elves, activate Cage, we could technically get there already. So that might be worth a shot. Wormlet grows. Play Elves. Activate Cage on Elves, putting Gearhulk. Alright, that worked. And then what do we get? I don't think Reliquary is going to be all that important if our opponent's just cycling and maybe casting some board wipes. Could go for Pixie to either pick up Cage or Gearhulk. Hoping there's no board wipe next turn. Boots could be good in the face of a sweeper. And Walker's also not bad. So I'm kind of liking Pixie, because I can always pick up Cage if they do wipe the board. And then maybe Boots over Walker. Might could also be an answer to an opposing vehicle, as long as it's not a creature. But yeah, opponent's got the explosions, so that's going to wipe our board, sadly. Opponent only capable of dealing 3 damage, so at least the Gearhulk survives. And we found a Dollmaker's shop. So what's our goal? We want to be able to set up our Collector's Cage a second time, which might involve Pixie picking it up, shop to make an extra token. So that might be the play this turn. Activate Cage on the Gearhulk just to make it a bit bigger. Play Pixie. Pick up Cage, play Dollmaker Shop. And then next turn we're in a position to enable Hideaway. Opponent's got plenty of vehicles in the graveyard. And another one. And now a collar. Alright, so play Cage. See what we get. Another Gearhulk. Looks good, or we can go for Steel Seraph. If we're planning to maybe just end the game right now. Since I can activate. Let's go on Gearhulk once again, maybe. Play this. Play Boots and equip. And we can go for lifelink here, but yeah, opponent scoops it up. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a functional hand. We'll need to find a third land eventually. For now, Wormlet, Boots, equip. Facing blue, black with a Stormchaser's Talent, so probably the Pixie deck. So they will have some removal and discard. So it's going to be a grindy matchup. One where we definitely want to try and resolve the Gearhulk. Unlikely that Wormlet survives. Fear of Isolation picks up their Stormchaser's Talent. Okay, land 3 is good. And I can still attack past the Fear of Isolation with the Wormlet. Although it's not necessarily a great trade for me, since the Wormlet would just keep on growing. But they could also easily have removal for Wormlets in the form of Nowhere to Run, which would ignore the ward. So maybe it's still in my best interest to just keep our life total high. Opponents got the Annex to draw some cards, so they might be on a demon version. Alright, for now, probably Salvager. And then line 4 would be awesome. Replay Talent. Now opponent's probably playing this town ain't big enough, which is a good answer to my creature tokens as well. Found a 4th land. So let's just attack with our 3/3, see what happens. And still probably go for a Gearhulk. Opponent's just looking at their bounce spell. Alright, so that was going to answer my 3/3 anyways. And then I could get Haywire Might to answer the Annex. A Reliquary is not bad either, although we have to be careful here if they can bounce it eventually. So, looking at Mights. Collar eventually also something we might want to get, but there's also a second Gearhulk. So then I might get the Teething Wormlet as something cheap I can play alongside Haywire Might, just so our hand doesn't become too clunky. 4/4 first strike, not the easiest to attack past. Although, as I mentioned, still have to be careful with Nowhere to Run, shrinking it down. But our opponent's just on the all-otter plan. And a cut down on Salvager, okay. They still can't attack into my first striker, unless they want to lose a token. Alright, opponent's still going for it, so 4 damage worth the token in their eyes. Found another land. So I've got quite a few options, including Gearhulk, give it haste, or Steel Seraph, so I can give Gearhulk a lifelink. And then next turn I still have the option of Gearhulk gets a Reliquary if I need to get rid of a demon. If our opponent tries to stabilize with a Ritual Chamber, for instance. Yeah, that seems good to me. So Wormlets into Steel Seraph. Give Steel Seraph haste, I want to say. And then give this a lifelink. So we're hitting for 8, gaining 4 up to 19. So we should be relatively safe. Don't expect Wormlet to keep Death Touch during the opponent's turn, because it's pretty easy for them to answer one of my creatures. Opponent jumping the Gearhulk just to save 1 damage. It still tramples. So, yeah, I've been especially happy with the Basilisk Collar, giving Death Touch and Lifelink, since that complements First Strike and Trample perfectly. If you've got First Strike and Death Touch, nothing is really blocking you. And yeah, opponent has a demon, but we should be able to remove it pretty easily. Collector's Cage is also quite tempting. Although we can just go for the sure thing with a Gearhulk as well. Yeah, let's just get the Reliquary. And then can maybe go for another Wormlet in case the game were to drag out. Sacrifice a Gearhulk I just played. And get rid of your Archfiend. And then I could give the Wormlet flying. So we're hitting for 7 in the air, and then we should trample for exactly lethal here. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. This is a tricky hand to evaluate. We're on the draw without any 1-drops, so this might be a little slow. Collector's Cage, we can only really get going if we can maybe curve like a salvager into a shop to start making tokens, which is realistic. Probably still starting with a Twitching Doll. So yeah, this could work out. Against aggro, might be a little slow as I mentioned, but I'll try it. Could still top deck one of our 1-drops. Any one of them would be great here. Wormlet to gain life. Lanor Elves to speed things up. Facing turn 1 Swamp. Well, at least the Twitching Doll doesn't die to go for the throat, which is something our opponent could be keeping up here. Could just be a cut down instead. Children's Edicts, alright, that's also quite effective. Opponent's got the Slasher, so gotta hope they don't have the Bloodletter to go with it. Still liking Salvager, and then maybe next turn we can double spell Wormlet plus a Dollmaker's Shop. Opponent's got an Archfiend instead. So a hit from Slasher is still going to be incredibly painful. I could trade, lose 2, and this at least wouldn't be bothering us for a little bit. Problem 2 is that we don't have a good attack into the Archfiend. So maybe I should just take this trade reluctantly. Or we can just hope that Cage delivers. In which case I take it. Because I can play Wormlets, play Cage activates. And we found a Steel Seraph. That's not bad. Although I still won't be able to attack. Do have to use this now. Although let's see. I guess I could technically activate this in the opponent's turn as well, although it's pretty risky if they have removal at instant speed. So in that case, I guess I'll target the Golem. Get Steel Seraph. And then no attacks here. So now I probably have to block the Slasher. Opponent's got the Annex as well, that's gonna hurt. So, don't really have a choice here. If they have removal, I die. We're at 1. Can play another Wormlet. Play another Cage. It seems better than going for Dollmaker's Shop. And find Gearhulk versus Steel Seraph. If I go for Gearhulk, I could get Might, but then, since I have to pay 1 mana here, I wouldn't be able to sacrifice it immediately. So we just go for Reliquary to answer the Archfiend. Yeah, that seems decent versus Steel Seraph, so I can give another creature lifelink. I think I prefer Gearhulk. And then we can activate on Steel Seraph. Play Gearhulk, trigger Wormlet some more. Get a Reliquary plus... Don't hate Pixie, since we can pick up a Cage again. But as I said, Haywire Might's not bad either. Let's go for Pixie. And then I could attack first, since I'm probably going to end up sacking the Salvager here. Give this lifelink. Alright, so we're back on track. And Pixie gives us a ton of flexibility, also with the Gearhulk. Opponent's got a Bloodletter. And a Bat to have a look. So we just want to try and get them in a spot where they're forced to block with the Bloodletter, which we might be able to set up. If I play Gallery, I only have 4 creatures in play, so that's not all that beneficial, but I don't hate playing the Shop, since that'll trigger the Wormlets as well. And then I'm fine to attack all out and activate my cages accordingly, since we can do so at instant speed. So yeah, good luck blocking this. Our opponents seem to have a totally functional draw. But yeah, we managed to turn it around. Possibly taking advantage of the fact that they have Go for the Throat as removal. But they also had Sheoldred's Edict, so they might be playing a mix. Awesome. So yeah, the Gearhulk certainly delivered. And the Dollmaker's Shop also found a nice home with this deck, as both 2-mana enchantment making more artifact tokens, and eventually the Gallery, also something powerful we can find with our Collector's Cage. So this version is a little bit different from the previous builds of Collector's Cage that you might have encountered playing the Overlord of the Mistmoors, which of course is still a very powerful card that you could hit off Collector's Cage's Hideaway, but this version focuses a little bit more on artifact synergy, and of course the Gearhulk ties everything together quite nicely, and also means you have a very solid plan going into best of 3 if you were to play this in traditional standard, as you can include some more 1-drops in the sideboard, so then in the post-sideboard games your Gearhulk has access to those sideboard cards, so you can draw them more consistently, and that includes Graveyard Hate like a Ghost Vacuum, as well as ways to protect your creatures, like maybe Shardmage's Rescue can be flashed in, or a Skrelv, another artifact for your various artifact synergies. You can think of Authority of the Consuls as well, in the face of an Orabrask Forge, can be quite effective, also just good against red decks in general, so the list goes on. And yeah, still has a very solid game plan going into the first game as well. So that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.